welcome to Art Atrium. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Grigo, Digigo, and Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Before we start our artist conversation, we're very fortunate to have Svetlana Rogers here to play a couple of guitar pieces for us. Svetlana is from Ukraine, and the first one is a Ukrainian piece, and the second one is a Spanish one. So I'd like you all to welcome Svetlana.
A young man who says, "I'll take this bandura." It's a folk instrument, and the name sounds Turkish to me, bandura. It's like a big, like this. And I play for my sweetheart, so she would like me, because I'm cool. I can play bandura. That was the song. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Again, a young man asking his sweetheart to come and see him after walking in the fields, and he said, "Don't be afraid, you won't be cold, I will warm you up, come and see me." The last Ukrainian song, it's called a mountain, but it's not about the mountain, it's about life, our lives, that there is a mountain and a river flows. This river flows like our life flows. Yeah. And Spanish pieces are this.
Thanks everyone for coming to Art Atrium for this artistic conversation between Milgate and Jason Wing. But first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wigo people, Fujiko and Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. This is the second solo exhibition by Milgate. So he's got a really interesting series of work which he has been working very hard on. In fact, the installation is actually while we're installing here, and he's actually worked for quite a few days to get it up. So I think Jason is a very good friend of Asher. They've known each other for a long time, and obviously Jason is very familiar with Asher's work, and of course everybody knows Jason Wing, a highly respected artist, doing a lot of different public art as well as his own art practice. So I'd like you all to welcome Jason Wing and Asher Milgate.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'd also like to pay my respects to the local Gadigal elders and all Aboriginal people here today. I'm a Biripi man from around the Taree region, and it's a wonderful privilege to be here today and to celebrate Asher's great work, which Simon mentioned we've been good friends for a while, but met through the arts and through photography. So I was actually photographed by Asher. So there was a series called The River Song People, and at the time I was living on the Cooks River, or we prefer to call it the Pelican River. And Asher was taking photographs of elders, young and old. And I guess what struck me was, I've been photographed by hundreds of people, but Asher had a certain, he had a certain vibe, and I could tell that he had a lot of experience with Aboriginal people, and that was very evident. And his ability to actually put me at ease, which is a great skill for a photographer. Anyway, enough about me. Actually, I will just say one other thing. Asher made this amazing series called Duality, which, just to sort of describe it, would be like a landscape like this, but whatever is green has been turned red. And the reason I mention this is because for me, this is probably one of the most important photographic series. And the reason why I say that is because Asher was able to capture something for Aboriginal people that Aboriginal artists and Aboriginal photographers have not been able to do as well as this series, in my opinion. Many people come close, like Ricky Maynard and others, but I feel like Asher really extended this, and I often tell people, when Aboriginal people look at everyday landscape, all we see is blood, blood on the leaves, blood in the river. And so that series called Duality, two different ways of seeing, very significant. So that's why I'm here repping this man. Okay, so I guess I'll just lead into the first question. What was it like coming from Duality, where we had these big, sleek, colourful photographs, and I admire the risk you took at going the extreme opposite. I mean, what are the sort of benefits to this extreme opposite?
Good question. I think with the scale of Duality and the relationship with landscape, and I think as a photographer or working in the arts, you want to see your work big, like as big as you can see. That's what you kind of want to do. And with this work, it's extremely personal, and there's a level of intimacy that I wanted to translate through the work itself to, I guess it's for me personally, but also for other people to come close closer to the work, because big works are great and they're easy to see, but smaller works require more of you, and encouraging people to get close and look for because some of them they are quite dark, but there's small details inside the work that's I guess relates back to kind of getting closer to that landscape and closer to that relationship that I personally have with this place here. So where this is where I grew up as a child from 3 years old, and so there's six negatives, but 4 of them are from the rural community called Woolman, and that is spelled W-U-L-U-M-A-N, and even the word itself as a child, it was just Woolman, but it's not until I've grown and experienced a lot more that I was able to decipher and understand there's a stark difference in relationship to landscape, and that's part of coming into that smaller scale, and also speaking to someone about smaller scale works and the importance of that, and kind of shift that relationship.
Yeah, well, it's a credit to how dynamic you are. I love that these are portraits. I mean, I see these as portraits, even though there's no obvious representation of people. But they are portraits, and they're multi-dimensional portraits. So you have multiple timelines. You have timelines of your mother, father, time, place, and space. So, I mean, can you tell us about, I kind of see this as like anti-stereotypical photography. Yeah, can you maybe expand on that a little bit?
Yes, I can. And I guess it really comes down to relationship, and I think everyone, these days, everyone's a photographer. Everyone can just, whip out their phone and take a photograph. And I think, that when you're in the photography world, it's a broad church. It's, you've got these technical people who are asking how many megapixels your camera has, or getting really close to the work and going, that's too grainy, and you should have written it like this, and that just makes me extremely tired. Honestly, I'm like, kill me. All respect to the people that's their perception, but that for me does not resonate. So for me, kind of extending what photography can be, and pushing it, and I think for many years photography had kept me inside its frame and inside its box of rules and expectation, and when I first really started to get into photography, it was abstract, and I loved the straight lines, and I loved being able to shoot something that you wouldn't be able to replicate again, and that has always been inside. But then I started to work and work on a documentary sense, which was a great learning, and it enabled me to learn more about myself, but also about First Nations, because that's where the majority of the work has kind of stemmed from. But I remember doing the abstract landscapes, like 20 years ago, and going, this is a bit empty, and I felt the emptiness in it. And then I think, and Sandy Edwards is here today, who was mentoring me at the time, and I remember saying, I want to do something on Wellington. This is what this is about. And she just said, when you came to start, and that was kind of like a little, jab, and I was like, oh. So then, like 2 weeks later, I was in Wellington and ended up doing a 5-year project, and just trying to put as much of my experience and, you know, the development of the worldview into the work to be able to provide opportunity for new ways of seeing and new ways of being, because I think the Australian landscape is so complex and so diverse, and we all look at it from our personal view and I guess a cultural lens. And even that phrase, cultural lens, you know, I've meditated on that for such a long time, particularly with this work, and I think I'm probably digressing here, but you know, being away from Wellington for such a long time and loving when I go back and visiting, but you know, I guess the foundation of my point of view is here, and I really was able to understand my cultural lens and my family, and you know, so my father's parents and his grandmother had worked in Christian missionaries. So then there's, for me, like, I'm acknowledging that lineage that, you know, flows through me. And my parents were school teachers in Wellington, New South Wales, with a high Aboriginal population. And, you know, I guess for me it's, I don't know, I didn't really, you know, set out, but this is just what has happened. And I think it's part of that family line and that view. And, you know, if we, for example, you know, you've got these, you know, these rectangular boxes, and if you look to the far right, that's a 4x5 piece of film that I have sewn into the 1988 bicentennial Singer sewing machine. And what I was thinking about, because, you know, thinking from an aerial point of view, and I remember, you know, as a kid, living on this farmhouse surrounded by mountains and surrounded by paddocks is what I thought. So then, you know, it is that point of view of paddocks farming, a culture and a way of seeing and being, but it hasn't been until I've been exposed to First Nation stories and, you know, really deep personal stories of relationship that kind of opened up a different point of view, and respectfully, because we all come from wherever we come from, and that's the way it is, but also, you know, providing opportunity to see different ways of seeing. And if we look at you know, these two works in the middle, you know, that's a yellow box gum tree, and you know, yellow box gum trees are renowned for making great honey in New South Wales. And I remember speaking to an elder in Wellington, Paul West, and there was a yellow box gum tree on the mission, and he said to me that was our medicine tree. And you know, and so this is another perspective. And then my former boss, he was from literally the back of Burke, and I mentioned something about a yellow box tree. He said, "Oh, they make good fence posts." You know, and it is about this personal relationship. And for me, this tree was my bus stop as a child in primary school. And so that, you know, also, and you know, I was with someone yesterday who loved the work, and for her it was an Australian scene. You know, the gum tree is very Australian. So like, we all look at it from these different points of view. So I think it's actually exciting to have a different point of view and be able to have that conversation around what it actually means to you.
Yeah, different points of view. I'm surprised and amazed at how much you're jammed into these photos. You know, you've got your father's portrait, your mother's portrait, different timelines, pre-contact, post-contact. But I just pulled a couple of words out from your statement, and again, just relatively briefly, these big questions, but if you can just sort of expand on a few of these phrases, like the first one, I've got a few, but the first one is process of time.
just the flowing movement, and it depends on your situation, I think. It's like where you've got you put something in the microwave for 20 seconds, it's probably the longest 20 seconds you've experienced. And I guess I thought about, the intensity I feel for this place, and thinking about that short time, and then again thinking, with people I've worked with who have been here for thousands and used through the generations, what that feeling might be like. And it is that sense of time and relationship that I'm deeply fascinated by. But even in the work itself, it is all time related. So even the development of the work, setting up the camera to take the photo, there's an element of time attached to it. It's this snapshot, and I guess this trying to get a working image on the film. But then when you take it into the darkroom, you've got this enlarger. And what I wanted to represent through time was, as I mentioned, there's 6 negatives that are used. So, the 2 end pieces are the same as you go through. But what I did, and some are dark and some are light, and I exposed, for example, maybe for 30 seconds on the emulsion side of the paper, and then with the other piece of paper, I flipped it over and I exposed it from the back of the paper, which kind of, talks about, different perspectives and different cultural views like coming through the back of the work. And that is kind of, talking about the sense of time.
I've got another one, grey thinking.
Well, grey thinking, I think I sit in the grey because I like to hear all points of view, and I think it's very easy to dichotomise our experience of hot and cold, and that as an example, when does hot become cold? And if you've dipped your hand in warm water and then put it into cold water, that experience is I guess amplified. So it's that's kind of what I'm talking about, and it's about that conversation, and we aren't necessarily separate from each other because we're all connected and we're all human as much as possible. And I think for me it is about dissolving biases and just kind of being with what's at hand without prejudice.
Your work does cross over in these grey areas. It's in a positive way. As a black voice, our voice is largely ignored, and so it's very important that we have non-Aboriginal voices of solidarity and explain different ways of thinking, not speaking for us, but speaking with us in solidarity. And I feel like these works really do that, whilst exposing your own personal journey, like from an artistic inquiry, from myself as a black artist. My journey is very similar to his journey. Everybody has a relationship to the land. A lot of people come up to me and say, I'm deeply connected to this land, and I've got this spiritual affinity, and I'm like, I'm sure you do, but it's just different. It's different to an Aboriginal understanding, but all relevant. In this day and age of speed, convenience, and efficiency, why did you choose these seemingly obsolete, sort of pain in the ass processes, expensive, risky, and more?
That's a good question. I think I threw myself into the deep end, and I always think about you know, there's a thing David Bowie said about, you know, creativity and throwing this, don't get comfortable, like, put yourself out there so like you're in the water so your feet are off the ground. So that's a really good place to be. And it wasn't necessarily the intent, but it's where I found myself. So like as we were leading towards the exhibition, I'm like, okay, you're gonna have to learn quick here. So it's just, and it just like everything was kept building up. But I think, you know, like using black and white photography, I think there's a level of integrity in the process, and it's, you know, digital is so convenient. For me, it kind of loses a bit of its soul, and I really wanted to put this, you know, I do like to go to extremes with things, so I really wanted to go as far as I possibly could and expand my capacity as an artist, and also to, you know, produce something, you know, I probably hadn't quite envisioned. And pushed it because, you know, this was 18 months of play and experimentation, and when it got down to the, you know, to the pointy end of it, I really needed to be clear on my vision and have clarity in what I was saying and what I was delivering. So it was I grew so much, and, you know, for this work, I think I honestly think it's quite pivotal for me in terms of, you know, my direction and what the potential, I can see what the potential is, because other works I've created is like, okay, I've done that, now what's next? And trying to push myself creatively, but also, you know, through the visual narrative of the work as well.
So for all of those budding artists out there, particularly photographers, Asha has moved 4 times in 5 years, and interstate, internationally. So literally starting from scratch almost every year, which, you know, in the art world, that is very challenging considering it's relationship based. What sort of advice do you have for someone who is, you know, just starting out, since you're like a start, stop, restart expert?
It's not for the faint-hearted, and sometimes you feel like you're banging your head against the wall. But I think, like for me, it always just comes back to being a human, and go where the warmth is and have genuine conversations. I think that's where it all lies. You know, it's hard and it asks a lot of you, but, you know, I think as an artist and trying to, you know, further your, you know, artistic career, you've got to do the work, because you can be the, you know, best practitioner, you know, the world's ever seen, but if no one sees you, or you know, no one knows of your work, that's, you know, that's half the battle. So it's really, you know, creating is a third of the job, and then the networking, and then, you know, maintaining relationships, and yeah, it's just, you know, I just like having genuine conversations. So then that's my guide, where the warmth is.
Yeah, so, I mean, we know that photographs, they have the power to stop wars, they have the power to start wars, they have really touched us in a way that paintings, sculpture, other art forms can't really reach us. So knowing the importance of photography, why is it seemingly treated in this art world as a bit of a third-class citizen, or, you know, why is it not valued as much as painting, or why is it not valued as much as sculpture, where we know it's one of the most valuable art forms? And I'm not actually asking for an actual answer, but it's a big question. But I'm curious, you know, I'm curious to know why is this so? And I don't know, Sandy, you might want to weigh in on this.
We're going to have to be here all afternoon.
That is a good question. I think, I've through this work, I've just kept travelling back. So then, to the, people who invented photography and Talbot and I forget the name of the French. What's it starts with N? Necroix.
Yes.
Yes. He has the last or the first known photograph, and he's took a photograph from his inside his a room looking outside, and then that was the formation of photography. So then that relationship was very different. It was representative of a tree or a person. And then over time, and I think with industrialisation and Kodak, Eastman, and the Box Brownie, it became part of the family, I guess, makeup to take photographs. Even as a child, I'm sure everyone who's grown up with film, don't waste the film, don't take a silly photo. When that's actually what I wanted to do. But I think it's become so prevalent, and often people's relationship with photography is very different. So you can go into, you meet people and go, what do you do? And it's like, photographer. Oh, do you shoot weddings? Do you shoot families? They're like, not really, but if friends ask me.
Do you say you're an artist? You tried saying.
Well, that's a funny one, because depending on what circle I'm in,
True. You've got to be careful what you say, really.
Yeah. I was just saying to Jason, I met some people in Adelaide who, run a commercial practice and, have this idea that they're artists. And I'm like, shoot events. And that's fine, but I don't, it's really kind of, commercially documented. Where I think once you start, in photography getting, that commercial aspect and that money kind of relationship with it, then I think that's where it flips and changes into something else. And that's where I've kind of tried to avoid my whole photographic career as much as possible. But it is a means to an end, and sometimes you have to sell your soul. It's just survive. You can't necessarily live in an ideal, world, which attended for a while. But and it's all relationship. And I think, listening to commercial photographers, this is my artwork. I'm like, okay. When I think what happens with photographers, we go and, particularly in my development, like, that's a great photo. But, I think it's the continuity of the story that you're able to chain together. That's when it becomes powerful, and that's when it becomes meaningful. Because it's, you could be Johnny on the spot and, beautiful, landscape or reflection, and take the photo, and that's all you have. But the difficulty is like building that body of work where it all relates together. I think that's where it's at.
And out of all the artworks you could have made, why this family portrait?
Well, I think as an artist, and I mentioned Carla Dickens saying to me in 2016 about, because I was working quite heavily with Aboriginal community, and she kind of just said, just start looking within. And so I've meditated on that, for the last 8 years to try and get to this point. And the importance of the family connotation. So the black and white prints. When my dad's here at the moment, and I remember him taking photos of us as kids in black and white, and going to the high school because Dad was a teacher, going to the high school darkroom and seeing the image come to life. And because I've coming back and, you know, trying to delve further and put, I guess, levels of understanding and complexity into the work. And that's where the sewing machine comes in, because Mum used to make dresses and she was a sewer, and so then I was like, how can I represent, you know, my family in my work as much as possible? And, you know, on either end is, you know, a bush church, and that's kind of, you know, whilst that was, you know, not far from where we lived, you know, and I think, you know, in my experience and my relationship with Aboriginal people, there's always been a religious connotation and a church, you know, sense of spirituality to it. And I've been lucky enough, and I guess, you know, having a sensibility inside me to be able to speak with First Nations people on a spiritual sense. So then that's really the reference. So I've kind of jammed as much as I can. And you know, there's complexity in there that I'm still trying to work out, and there's things that are unresolved inside me personally, but, you know, there's also a mystery within, you know, within the Australian landscape, and particularly and that place as well, that I'll never understand. And I guess I'm referencing as much as I do know, and you know, the galaxy of what I've done.
The traditional origins of photography were simply to capture what's there. How do you feel about the fact that now we can't trust any digital visual image anymore? I mean, knowing, like, understanding that editing and framing and all of that were subtle forms of manipulation, but now in this world, it's got some pretty extreme consequences where we can't trust a still image, let alone video images with, you know, I don't know if you've all seen the Obama deepfake where you can make the president say whatever in real time. You know, how do you feel about this extreme manipulation? And I guess what does that I mean, will it have an impact on photography in a traditional sense?
Big one.
Yeah, we're asking big questions. That's
a great question.
About a half an hour, but I don't know, just anything that resonates with you about that.
Yeah, I think it's quite, you know, on both sides of the coin, but, you know, I think artistically it could be quite exciting, but I think, you know, like in the wrong hands, I think it's quite frightening. It's unsettling, and I think, you know, we're at the frontier of it. And then even, like, you know, with screens and technology and the research that's coming through and the effect on, you know, on the kids and, you know, ADHD and, you know, depression, all these things, I think, you know, we are the testing ground for, you know, the future. And I think we need to tread gently. But I think, you know, the horse has already bolted, because you can do that thing with Obama, and, you know, you don't even have to, you know, you can just, like, take a little video of yourself talking and put your voice in, and it does it. Isn't that? It's like, it's beyond comprehension of where it can go. And you think about technology over the years, you know, I remember, you know, air conditioning being an added feature in the car. Like, you know, manual windows, but now it, you know, basically drives for you. I saw something in China, they've developed these drones where they can come pick you up and drone you to another place, you know, like a taxi. It's like, what world are we living in? And I think for me, like, you know, moving away from digital and going, you know, into analog is a way to, you know, kind of, I guess it's a safer place. And I'm, you and I think, that whole digital, digital's here forever, but I want to save the knowledge, because, I admire the history of the people that came before, and I think we need to, value that knowledge and not, piss it away.
Are you, with the new iPhone coming out, are you worried about losing your job as a photographer? Or do the classification systems get updated? Does the definition of a photographer get updated? How do we define a photographer? Just throwing out massive bombs out there. But do you also fear? I mean, how do you feel as what I would call like a proper photographer? How do you feel about people like now? Like in a lot of photography competitions, they actually have a separate category purely for AI generated photographs. How do you feel about that as a professional, and are you fearful of that?
I'm personally not fearful. I think probably for commercial photographers it could be advantageous, but I think it does lessen the ability and lessen the skill and perception of what photography is. Like even with an iPhone, I often, iPhones take a great photo, almost as good as a professional camera. Maybe in the right light, you can pull the wool over people's eyes. But I go, okay, well, your lens is the size of P, and the professional lens is the size of your hand. But I guess I'm kind of on the fence with the technology. We've heard people involved in product photography and going, it's fantastic. But artistically, I think, with the prompts, I think if you're very articulate and potentially if you're a good writer, I think, and good at describing things, I think that would be a really interesting, modality to explore, particularly if you consider yourself non-artistic or whatever that might mean to you personally. But I think there's room, and I think photography is probably still on the back foot of art, traditionally, because it's a new idea, and maybe with people doing prompted and technological generated images, I think that it might hold photography up potentially in the long term, because there's a real skill involved and there's a real sensibility and an internal sensibility around relationship with your camera, relationship with light. They're the foundations of what photography is, and I don't think that will go away. And I think that's what we, maybe I'm just, being hopeful, but it's going to be wild out there, that's what I think.
Yeah, well, I think the cream always rises to the top, I think. Just how we going for time, Simon?
Yeah, I think maybe questions for the audience.
Yeah, great. Any questions from the audience? Yeah.
Great photos. I really love it. I'm not a photography aficionado in any sense, but I can see with the sewing machine over there and the lace tablecloth, you've got your grandmother and your mother, and I can see with the piece over here, yourself by doing the machine stitching on and piercing of the paper. Can you speak a bit more about how then the piercing on the paper has affected this set of photographs here, and your feelings of using that machine pierced effect on your photographs here?
Yeah, I think using that slide film or piece of film 4x5, that would, I kind of kept coming back to the idea of what I had as a child and part of that worldview, and just it was kind of like just a reminder of that time and that sewing machine. When I saw that, so I've got 2 of those machines. I like Simon was saying, I was still finishing the prints here because I had to use that, and I got that shit from South Australia. And long story short, I had to get finished service to finish the work on Friday and Saturday. But and just that point of view, and I remember as a kid in kindergarten getting the bicentenary coin, and how in a way that was a special kind of moment culturally, and I had no idea really about the outside world and the effects that it was having on First Nations people. So, and through that process of sewing, and I'm thinking about my dad and my mum and my grandparents and where I grew up. And it wasn't until I started to I was filming the needle going in, and I was like, wow, this is pretty pretty brutal experience. And so that kind of reinforced the impact of our people on this land, and also the industrialisation of the land itself, and that relationship of being with the land, but also making money off the land, and that's a big shift. But culturally, that is people live their cultures and live their in a way with a lot of people have their blinkers on, and for me, I wasn't able to see outside my culture until I learned about another one, and I've gone to a lot of levels to deeply understand as much as possible, and then in a way I kind of feel like I've kind of separated myself from my foundation culture, but I'm still very much a part of it, and I guess through this work is providing opportunities of new ways of seeing and feeling that landscape. So, even through photography, when I take all of these photos, and particularly with film, because it becomes a reverence that you're taking, and you're creating this image because I have a deep emotional feeling to make me stop, and I take the photo because there's something in it that I feel that is often beyond what I'm able to articulate, and I think that's why I do this work, because I don't feel like verbally that's how I can explain things. So I have to explain it through the work, and hopefully with these works, and the more time you spend with it, you're able to gain a different or a greater understanding of a landscape or a tree, for example. Does that answer that?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Talking about technology with the iPhone, and people can take great shots, but generally they have to take many to get one good one. And going back to the early days of photography, when you had a roll of film or just one single piece of film, you had to have a good eye and be able to capture a moment. Now you look at all the history of photography, and those early shots, the good ones that stand out were a good eye and someone who captured that moment. So how do you feel about a good photographer has to have a good eye?
I think that is everything. I think,
And intuition is also.
Intuition, but seeing and feeling. I think that's like for me, and like younger photographers I talk to, they want to know the technicality, but it's that emotional sense with it's all there. And I think you've been able to, and I think that's what the really great photographers do, is translate that emotion, and be patient. And often when I shoot film, a whole, you know, and I shoot film for you know, creativity purposes and also for, you know, for fun. But before I, you know, pull the shutter, I think, would I have this on my wall? And if I don't, sometimes I just do it because, you know, I like it. Maybe it's the sound I'm addicted to. But yeah, and just, yeah, I think that's what it is. You know, and you look at those old masters and, you know, Ansel Adams and Elliot Irwin, all these incredible American photographers who, you know, really paved the way. And it probably goes back to what you were saying. I'll ask the question about, you know, photography being taken seriously. Unfortunately, in Australia, it is a third-class citizen in terms of artistic endeavours. But in America, particularly, it is highly prized, highly valued as a social, you know, medium of expression, and highly valued. Maybe we're a bit behind the times over here in Australia.
Okay, so thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Jason. Very informative talk. Thanks for your very insightful questions and Ashley's very personal responses. So if you put your hand together again for